My name is Helen Grace McMillan, and I'm 67 years old now. But deep inside, a part of me is still stuck at 33, the age I was when my whole world collapsed. I got married young, just 18, to Thomas Eugene McMillan, who was 27 at the time. Back then, I thought I was stepping into a love story, but I was walking into a slow-burning betrayal. It happened in the late 1980s, in the quiet, deeply religious town of Maplewood, nestled in the heart of North Carolina. Life was simple. Church on Sundays, potlucks on Wednesdays, neighbors who knew your name and your secrets. I was the only daughter of a strong Southern mother, and the day she got diagnosed with cancer, everything else faded. I spent days and nights in that hospital room, brushing her thinning hair, holding her trembling hands, while Thomas, my husband, was finding comfort in the arms of Pastor Deborah Lynn, the very woman who had baptized me, prayed with me, and vowed to uphold our marriage before God. The betrayal wasn't just physical, it was spiritual, emotional, devastating. She wasn't just our pastor, she was family, a mother figure, my mentor. And yet, she was the one my husband chose to hold while I was breaking into pieces beside my dying mother. My younger brother Mark, our nosy neighbor Nancy, and even the church deacon Mr. Albright would all end up tangled in this story, some trying to protect me, others hiding truths of their own. What happened next would tear our community in half and leave a scar on my soul that no sermon could ever heal. This isn't just a story about cheating. It's about faith, silence, shame, and how I found a voice again through the ashes of humiliation. Have you ever trusted someone so deeply, so completely, that you couldn't even imagine they'd be capable of destroying you? I did. And they did. It's hard to speak these words out loud. They tremble in my throat like old ghosts. But silence has a weight, and I've carried it for too long. You see, while I was watching my mother slowly wither away in a sterile hospital bed, my husband was wrapping himself in the arms of the one person I believed was sacred, our pastor, my spiritual guide, the woman who led the prayer at our wedding. My name is Helen Grace McMillan. I'm 67 years old, and for over 3 decades, I kept this truth buried under good manners, quiet Sundays, and forced smiles. But some betrayals don't rot with time. They ferment, and eventually, they spill. It was Maplewood, North Carolina, a sleepy little southern town where the church bells rang louder than the gossip. I was 33, already a wife for over a decade, when my mother fell ill, and in the weeks I cared for her, washing her hair, feeding her spoon by spoon, praying over her fragile frame, my husband was feeding something else. His flesh, his desire, his weakness. With Pastor Deborah Lynn, how did it happen? When did it start? And what happens when the very person you worship beside becomes the reason you stop believing? If you've ever felt betrayed, not just in your bed, but in your soul, then this story is for you. And if you're brave enough, I'll take you with me through every memory, every whisper, every breakdown, until you see how I rose again from it all. But first, let me take you back to the Sunday morning when I first started to feel something was off. Back to a moment that seemed so small, yet shattered everything. Before we begin, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell, and stay with me till the end. I promise, this story will make you feel seen, heard, and maybe even healed. Now, have you ever walked into a church thinking you were safe, only to find the devil sitting in the front row? It was a warm Sunday morning in Maplewood, the kind where the air smells like honeysuckle and the church bells echo through every kitchen window. I remember the soft clink of my teacup against the saucer, the hum of the radio playing gospel low in the background, and the quiet creak of the porch swing as I sat alone, letting the breeze tangle through my hair. My husband, Thomas, had already left early, said he needed to help Pastor Deborah set up for the youth service. At the time, I thought nothing of it. After all, she was our shepherd, our spiritual anchor, the woman who had baptized both of us and blessed our union 10 years before. But something in my gut, it whispered, quiet, cold, like a draft through a closed door. I got dressed slower than usual that morning, as if time itself had thickened around me. My Sunday dress felt too tight, the shoes too stiff, my heart too heavy. I brushed it off, told myself it was just worry over Mama. She had started chemo that week, and the hospital was becoming a second home. But deep down, something darker was stirring, something I didn't have words for. Not yet. When I arrived at church, the sanctuary was already buzzing. Voices blended like smoke, laughter rising to icily in some corners, whispers dying too quickly in others. I scanned the room for Thomas. I found him behind the altar, laughing with Pastor Deborah. Their heads were close, too close. Her hand was on his forearm, too long, her smile. Not pastoral, not holy. "Hey, Helen," she called, radiant in her blue robe. "We were just talking about you. You're a saint, caring for your mama like that. I smiled back, mechanical. My eyes didn't leave her hand. Thomas barely looked my way. You okay, hun? He asked, as if he wasn't sure who I was in that moment. I nodded, but something inside me cracked. A sliver, small. After service, I stayed behind to help with coffee. It was my routine. But that morning, I caught something I wasn't meant to see. Pastor Deborah slipping Thomas a folded note, quick as a blink. His hand covered it fast, sliding it into his coat pocket. They both laughed, but not out loud. Not church loud, secret loud. I told myself it was nothing. I told myself I was being silly. I told myself the woman who laid hands on the sick and led the flock wouldn't possibly be touching my husband in the dark. But by that night, I couldn't sleep. The scent of his shirt didn't smell like me anymore. It smelled like gardenia, the perfume Deborah wore every Sunday. The one she said reminded her of her late mother. I laid in bed that night, staring at the ceiling fan. Round and round, just like my thoughts. Something was unraveling, and I didn't even know where the string began. Tell me something. Have you ever looked at someone you love and suddenly seen a stranger? That night was the first time I slept with my back turned to Thomas. I didn't say anything, didn't ask questions, but silence has a sound, and it filled the room like thunder. No one else could hear. I lay still, eyes open in the dark, listening to his breath. Steady, calm, as if nothing was wrong, as if he hadn't come home later than usual, as if the gardenia perfume clinging to his collar wasn't someone else's touch pressed into fabric. I reached out and ran my hand across his side of the bed, cold, like he hadn't been there in hours. He mumbled something in his sleep. I couldn't make out the words, but they weren't for me. I knew that much. Morning came like a slap. I was up early, heading straight to the hospital. Mama's chemo was hitting harder than expected, and she needed me more than ever. The nurse said she'd been asking for me all night. That broke something in me, because while I was lying next to a man I no longer recognized, my mother was fighting for her life. Alone, I brought her oatmeal with honey. She smiled, but her eyes were dim, glassy with pain. Helen, baby, you look tired, she whispered. Are you taking care of yourself? I kissed her forehead and lied through my teeth. I'm fine, Mama. Everything's fine. But my stomach was turning. I couldn't eat. I couldn't focus. I kept thinking about that folded note, about how Deborah smiled too warmly, how Thomas laughed too freely, how my instincts, the same instincts that had protected me as a girl in a broken house, were begging me to listen again. That afternoon, while Mama dozed, I went home for a change of clothes. The house was too quiet, too neat, but something was off. His jacket was hanging on the hook by the door, the same one he'd worn to church. I knew I shouldn't, but I did. I reached into the pocket. The note was still there. It was folded 3 times. Pink paper, feminine, smelled of gardenia. And inside, 5 little words. Let's pray together. Tonight, no name, no explanation, just a time and a location. Back office, 9 p.m. My blood ran cold. It wasn't what was written. It was what was unsaid. The intimacy of ink. The secretiveness. The way my hand trembled as I held the proof that something sacred had already been defiled. I sat down at the kitchen table and stared at the note for what felt like hours. I didn't cry. Not yet. The tears were afraid to come out. They were hiding behind shock, behind rage, behind the weight of every Bible verse Deborah had ever preached, on fidelity, on marriage, on sin, and Thomas. Where was he? He didn't come home that night until almost midnight. He said he was with the guys. He didn't know I'd already seen his lie written in swirls of pink ink. I asked nothing. He kissed my cheek, and I turned my face away. But inside, a storm had begun. I don't know what came over me that evening. Maybe it was instinct. Maybe it was the ache of too many unanswered questions. Or maybe it was that pink note burning in my apron pocket all day, like a match waiting to catch fire. I knew what I had to do, even if I didn't want to believe where it would lead me. I made dinner like I always did. Fried chicken, collard greens, mashed potatoes, his favorite. I set the table, poured sweet tea into the mason jar glasses. I even lit a candle, just to keep up the illusion that everything was still normal. But inside me, the air was suffocating. He came home late again, kissed my forehead like a stranger passing by on the street, sat down, ate 2 helpings, talked about the church budget like we hadn't been sleeping beside a secret all week. Then at 8:30, he stood up. Pastor Deborah asked me to help with some repairs in the back office, he said, grabbing his coat. Won't take long. My hands froze on the plate I was drying. I didn't look at him. I just nodded. Sure, I said. Don't stay out too late. The moment the door clicked shut, I moved fast. I didn't even change my shoes, just grabbed my keys, wrapped myself in a shawl, and slipped out the back. Heart pounding so loud, it drowned out the crickets. The church was only 3 blocks away. The night air was thick with the scent of damp grass and warm pavement. Somewhere far off, a dog barked. Somewhere closer, I heard voices. The church was dark except for the faint glow spilling from the stained glass windows. I crept along the side, heart in my throat, and stood beneath the pastor's window. The curtain was cracked. What I saw, I wish I could forget. There was Thomas, leaning against her desk like he owned the place, shirt half untucked. And there she was, Pastor Deborah without her robe, in a pale blue dress, barefoot, pouring wine into 2 glasses. She was laughing. He was smiling in a way I hadn't seen in years. Intimate, familiar, hungry. She walked up to him, whispered something I couldn't hear, touched his chest. His hands wrapped around her waist. Then he kissed her, and the world broke. I stumbled back, one hand over my mouth, the other gripping the stone wall of the church like it could hold me together. My knees buckled. My lungs forgot how to breathe. And in that one frozen moment, I understood something brutal. He had never stopped loving. He had just stopped loving me. I walked home in silence, didn't cry, didn't scream, just walked through the streets of Maplewood like a ghost. The same streets we used to stroll together after Sunday service, fingers laced, smiles wide. Now, those streets held shadows and shame. Back home, I sat on the couch in the dark, still holding the pink note. And when he came back around midnight, smelling like gardenia and sin, I was still there. He didn't know I knew. Not yet. But I did. And everything had changed. The next morning, I woke up before him. I didn't sleep, just laid there, listening to his breath, memorizing the sound of a man who had already left me without packing a bag. The sun hadn't yet touched the curtain, but I was wide awake, eyes raw, heart blistered. I made breakfast like always. Bacon, eggs, biscuits from scratch. A Southern woman knows how to hide heartbreak behind gravy and grit. He sat at the table, half smiling, sipping coffee like he wasn't soaked in betrayal. "You okay, hun?" he asked, his voice low, casual. I looked up from the skillet and stared him right in the eye. Why wouldn't I be? He paused, just a blink. But I saw it, the flicker of fear, guilt, or maybe anticipation. Like he knew something was coming, but didn't know when. After breakfast, he left for work. Said he had errands to run for the church. I nodded again, silent. I'd learned that silence, in the right hands, could be louder than any scream. That day at the hospital, Mama was weaker. Her voice barely rose above a whisper. But when I leaned close, she took my hand and said, "Don't let anything steal your peace, baby girl. Not even love." I wanted to cry right there. Wanted to spill everything into her lap like a broken child. But I couldn't. She was dying. And I refused to let my grief infect her last days. That night, I decided to ask him. I set the table again, cooked again, waited again. When he came home, I didn't wait for a smile. "Thomas," I said, sharp as glass, "are you having an affair?" He froze halfway out of his coat, blinked, smiled, nervous. "What, baby? Where's this coming from?" I didn't blink. "Are you sleeping with Pastor Deborah?" He laughed, a dry, hollow sound. "Helen, that's ridiculous. She's our pastor." "She's not mine anymore," I whispered. His face changed. The laughter died. "Where is this coming from?" "I saw you. Sunday night." Through her window, silence. Long, thick, dangerous. He sat down slowly, like the weight of what I said had broken his knees. "I didn't mean for it to happen," he finally muttered. It got complicated. You were gone all the time. At the hospital, I was alone. That's when I felt it rage. Not the loud kind. The quiet kind that boils beneath your ribs and tastes like copper. "My mother is dying," I said. "And you were lonely." He said, "Nothing. Do you know how many nights I slept on a hospital chair, praying over her, while you were laying hands on our pastor instead?" Still nothing. I stood there, shaking. Not from sadness, from fury. From betrayal, so sharp it made me dizzy. You didn't just betray me, Thomas. You betrayed God, our vows, her congregation, everything we ever stood for. He tried to speak. I raised my hand. And then I said it, the words I never thought I'd say. "Get out." He didn't argue. He didn't cry. He didn't even ask if I meant it. Thomas simply stood up, walked to the bedroom, packed a single duffel bag, and left. No apology. No fight. No final words to mark the death of a decade together. Just the soft click of the front door, closing behind him, like a chapter turning without punctuation. And just like that, I was alone. The house felt hollow, like it had exhaled him out. Every room echoed with absence. His cologne still clung to the hallway. His razor was still beside the sink. His half-read Bible sat on the nightstand with a bookmark in Corinthians. The verse about love being patient and kind. I almost laughed. That night, I crawled into bed fully clothed. Didn't shower. Didn't eat. The pillowcase caught the first tears. Then the second. Then the flood. I wept for my mother, for my marriage, for the years I gave and the love I believed was mutual. I wept for the girl who got married at 18, believing love and faith would be enough. And I wept because I didn't know what came next. The days that followed blurred. Church folks started whispering. I could feel it in their stares. The ones that lingered too long at the grocery store, the ones that paused just before saying hello. Pastor Deborah kept preaching, standing in front of the congregation like nothing had happened, like she wasn't secretly holding the hand of a married man just nights before. I stopped going to church. Mama noticed. You skipping church, Helen? She asked one afternoon, her voice brittle. I can't sit under her, I said. I won't. She didn't press, just nodded, slow. Sometimes the devil dresses up real nice. Sings real pretty too. Her words clung to me. Everywhere I went, I saw ghosts. The diner where Thomas and I used to have pie on Sundays. The gas station where we fought over groceries. Even the post office, where Deborah once hugged me and said she was praying over my marriage. That one made my stomach turn. One morning, I got a letter. No return address. Just my name in shaky handwriting. Inside was a photo, me and Thomas on our wedding day. Folded behind it, a scrap of paper. You were too good for him. I don't know who sent it. Maybe someone from church. Maybe someone who knew more than they let on. But I held that photo in my hands for hours, tears dripping down my wrists. And I realized something. Even if he came back, I wouldn't want him anymore. He had touched something sacred with dirty hands. And I couldn't unknow that. The week after Thomas left, I tried to pretend. I told people I was fine, that he was staying with a friend, that we needed space. But I was unraveling, quietly, politely, the Southern way, smiling while bleeding. I poured myself into Mama's care. I cleaned her wounds. I held her hand during chemo. I read Psalms aloud, even when my own faith felt like a glass shattered across the chapel floor. But Mama, she saw through it all. One afternoon, while I was brushing her hair with the same old comb she'd used on me as a child, she looked at me in the mirror and said, "You don't have to lie to me, baby. I know he's gone." I froze, my hands still in her silver curls. "You think I don't hear the silence in your voice?" She continued, her eyes soft but sharp. "You think I don't feel the heartbreak hanging off your shoulders like soaked laundry?" Tears welled up in my eyes, but I blinked them back. I didn't want to cry in front of her. She was the one fighting for her life, not me. "I didn't want you to worry," I whispered. She chuckled, and it cracked through the quiet like thunder. "Helen Grace McMillan, I've been worrying about you since the day you were born. That's not going to stop just 'cause I'm dying." That's when I broke. I dropped the comb and sat on the edge of her bed, sobbing into my hands. She pulled me close, fragile arms around my shoulders, heart beating like a drum, weakened by time, but strong enough to hold mine. I saw the way he looked at her. She said, "Long before you did, but I knew you had to see it for yourself. That's the curse of loving someone too deeply sometimes. We let them burn the house down just so we don't feel alone." I cried harder. I thought I was being a good wife. I choked. "You were," she said. "He just wasn't a good husband." That night, I stayed in the hospital with her, slept in the chair, her hand in mine. The machines hummed, the nurses whispered, and for the first time in weeks, I felt a flicker of something warm. Not hope, not yet, but something close. Mama was fading. I knew it, but she was giving me one last gift before she left: clarity. I realized then that her love was the kind that never betrayed, never lied, never made excuses. It was the kind that stayed, even when everything else fell apart. There are some days that stay stitched into your skin, no matter how many years pass, no matter how much healing you try to do. For me, it was the day I lost Mama. It was a Tuesday morning. The sky was pale, colorless, like it, too, had wept itself empty. The world outside the hospital window looked frozen in time, trees still, birds absent, even the wind seemed to be holding its breath. Mama had barely spoken in 2 days. Her body was there, fragile and soft, but her spirit was already leaning toward the edge. I sat beside her bed, hand in hers, humming softly. It was the lullaby she used to sing to me when I was a girl afraid of the dark. "Don't be afraid of the night, baby girl," she used to whisper. "God watches different when it's quiet." Her breaths were shallow, rhythmic. Then, suddenly, they paused. Then again, I leaned in closer. She opened her eyes barely. "Don't let that woman steal your faith too," she said. Her voice was a breath, a feather. "God didn't leave you. He was just weeping with you." And then she smiled, a faint, peaceful, tired smile. I watched her take one last breath, and that was it. I didn't scream. I didn't collapse. I just sat there, frozen, watching the monitor stop its soft beeping. the line on the screen flattening like a road leading somewhere I couldn't follow. A nurse came in quietly, touched my shoulder. I nodded. Then I stood. I kissed her forehead and whispered, "Thank you for loving me when he didn't." The funeral was small. Just family and a few neighbors. I wore Mama's favorite brooch, the one shaped like an angel's wing. Pastor Deborah offered to lead the service, but I refused. Firmly, publicly. "She's not welcome," I told the director. Not one word from her. When I said that, the whole town looked up. They knew something now. And whispers began to spread like wildfire through the pews. After the burial, I walked home alone. My heels sank into the wet grass, but I didn't care. I looked at the sky and whispered a prayer. Not for peace, not for forgiveness, for clarity. Because, with Mama gone, there was no one left to protect me from the truth. And the truth was, I wasn't just mourning a mother. I was mourning a version of myself that had died with her. After Mama's funeral, something in me changed. The kind of change that doesn't show up in mirrors, but in the way you walk into a room, no longer apologizing for existing. I was still grieving, still raw, but now I had nothing left to lose. And sometimes, that's where courage is born. The next Sunday, I woke up before the sun, put on my black dress, the one with the lace collar Mama liked. Did my hair tight? No frills, no makeup. Just my bare face and the truth behind my eyes. I walked to church alone. The air was thick, like it knew what I was about to do. The birds were quiet, the bells louder than usual. As I stepped into the sanctuary, heads turned, conversations halted. Some smiled nervously, others just watched, like they knew something was coming. And it was. Pastor Deborah stood at the pulpit, flipping through her notes, calm as a summer pond. She looked up and saw me. I didn't smile. Her face flinched, just for a second. And that was enough. I sat on the second pew, front and center. She started preaching, but I wasn't listening. I was watching, studying. Every gesture, every flicker of guilt she tried to tuck behind scripture. She quoted Corinthians again, the same verse marked in Thomas's Bible. Love is patient, love is kind. I almost laughed. When the service ended, she approached me in the aisle, her smile a polished lie. "Helen, I'm so sorry for your loss." "Your mother was a don't," I said. Just one word. Sharp, final. People nearby went still. "I need to speak with you," she whispered, her face pale now. "Then, let's speak." We stepped into the hallway, behind the sanctuary. I shut the door behind us. The moment it clicked, I turned to her. "You slept with my husband while I was wiping chemo sweat off my dying mother's skin," I said, each word measured like a judge passing sentence. She opened her mouth. I raised a hand. "No, you don't get to preach now. You don't get to hide behind verses. You broke my family. You made a mockery of my faith. And you led my husband to sin while standing in the pulpit." Tears filled her eyes. It wasn't supposed to happen like that. But it did. She tried to apologize. I didn't listen. "I'm not here for revenge," I said. "I'm here to say this. You no longer have power over me. Your lies, your guilt, your shame, they're yours to carry now, not mine." And then I walked out. Out of the hallway, out of the church, out of her shadow. The next few days felt different, lighter. Not because the pain had left, but because I had finally spoken it out loud. Spoken to her. I didn't need her guilt or her apology. I just needed the truth to have a voice. And now, it did. Word traveled fast in Maplewood. By Wednesday, everyone from the postmaster to the diner waitress was speaking my name. Not with pity, but with a quiet kind of reverence. Like maybe, just maybe, I was stronger than anyone had realized. At the grocery store, Mr. Albright, the church deacon, stopped me by the peaches. "I had my suspicions," he said softly, eyes low. "But I never had proof. I'm sorry for not stepping in." I nodded. That was all I needed. At the pharmacy, Nancy, my nosy neighbor, handed me a bag of tea with a squeeze of the hand. "Lemon balm," she whispered. "For grief. For strength." At first, I hated the whispers. But then, I realized they weren't about scandal anymore. They were about survival. And in a town like ours, survival becomes legend. Even Thomas tried to reach out. He called once. I didn't answer. Then he showed up on the porch 3 weeks to the day after Mama's funeral. His face was thinner, his hair messier, but his voice was still small. "Helen," he said, holding his hat in both hands. I made a mistake. I opened the screen door, stared him down. "No," I said, "you made a choice." He swallowed. "Can we talk?" We just did. And I closed the door. The sound of that latch clicking back into place was the first peaceful sound I'd heard in months. That night, I lit a candle for Mama, sat in her rocking chair on the porch, The air smelled like earth and dew, the stars flickering like old memories in the sky. And I realized something. I was grieving many things. My mother, my marriage, my youth, my blind faith. But I wasn't grieving myself anymore. Because I was still here. Still standing. Still me. And that woman, the one who had lost everything, she was slowly, quietly, becoming someone new. It was a Saturday morning when it happened. That strange, unexpected sound that slipped from my lips and startled even me. A laugh. Not loud, not forced, not wrapped in pain. Just light. It came as I stood on the porch, watering Mama's old flower pots. The geraniums had started to bloom again, red and stubborn. And right there, out of nowhere, the cat I never claimed, but always fed, Roscoe leaped up from beneath the steps and knocked over the watering can. Water splashed across my dress and I gasped, and then laughed. And Lord, it felt foreign, like trying on a pair of shoes that had belonged to someone else. But it was mine. It came from me. For weeks, I had lived in a fog. Grief like syrup, betrayal like thorns in the bedsheets. But that laugh, it was a crack in the wall. A sign that maybe, just maybe, joy hadn't died with my mother, or been buried with my marriage. I went inside, dug through the cabinet, and pulled out Mama's old recipe book, the one with the peach cobbler stained on every other page. I hadn't baked in months, but that morning, I turned on the radio, tied my apron, and started again. Flour, butter, brown sugar, cinnamon. The scent filled the house and wrapped around me like a hug from the past. Later that day, Mark, my brother, stopped by. He'd been checking in more often. Quiet visits, no questions. Just presence. He sat down, took one bite, and smiled. You made it just like Mama used to. I tried, I said, watching the steam curl off his plate. You're coming back, he said softly, piece by piece. I didn't answer, but I knew he was right. The pain was still there, still sharp some days, dull on others. But it didn't own me anymore. It didn't sit in every chair, haunt every hallway, sleep in my bed. I'd learned to leave space for both the sorrow and the sunrise. That night, I walked barefoot through the backyard. The grass was cool. The air carried the smell of honeysuckle and smoke from a neighbor's fire pit. I looked up at the stars, same ones Mama used to point out when I was little, and I whispered, I'm still here. The wind rustled the trees like it was answering back. Forgiveness isn't a switch you flip. It's not a sunrise that happens overnight. It's more like a garden after a storm, full of broken branches, flooded roots, but still alive. It had been months since Thomas walked out and Mama passed on. Maplewood had gone through another season, summer into fall. The trees changed like I did, shedding what no longer served them, bracing for the cold, still beautiful. One Sunday afternoon, I stood outside the church. Not inside, just stood there, watching people pour out after service. Deborah still preached, though the pews were thinner now. Word had spread. Some people stayed. Others drifted off to newer churches in nearby towns. That wasn't my concern anymore. I wasn't there for her. I was there for me. I saw Thomas too, sitting on the last pew, eyes tired, shoulders slumped. He looked older, not just in his face, but in his spirit. He caught my eye. We didn't wave, didn't nod, just saw each other. And that was enough. I turned and walked down toward the cemetery, basket in hand. Mama's grave was near the old oak tree, the one she loved for its shade. I sat beside her stone, laid down some marigolds and sage. I'm okay now, I said out loud, and I meant it. I pulled out a notebook from my bag, the one I'd been writing in late at night, letters I never sent, memories I couldn't carry in silence. One of them was for Thomas. I didn't plan to give it to him. It wasn't for him. It was for me. I read it out loud, soft and steady. You hurt me in a way I thought I wouldn't survive. But I did. I thought I needed answers from you. I don't. I thought I needed justice. I don't. I needed to remember who I was before you. And I did. So, I forgive you. Not because you asked, but because I need peace more than I need resentment. I folded the paper, kissed the edge, and buried it beneath a rock beside Mama's grave. She would have wanted that. To know I let go. Not for him. For me. Because healing isn't about erasing what happened. It's about no longer letting it define what comes next. It was early spring when I finally looked in the mirror and didn't see a widow of betrayal, but a woman reborn. I had painted the bedroom a soft shade of cream. Mama always said light walls made a home feel open to healing. I changed the linens, bought new curtains, donated the old quilt Thomas liked, and folded away the wedding album for good. That morning, I stood in front of the mirror with the window open, breeze slipping in like music. My hair had more gray than it used to. My face had lines. But my eyes, they weren't tired anymore. They were steady, alive. I touched the necklace around my neck. Mama's locket, passed down 3 generations. Inside was a photo of her holding me as a baby. I remembered that day. Not from memory, but from the stories she told. You were a fighter even then, she'd say. Tiny fists, big lungs. I poured myself a cup of tea, sat on the porch, and opened a letter from a women's circle in town. They'd invited me to speak, not about what happened, but about what came after. About grief, faith, starting over. For a moment, fear crept in. What if I wasn't ready? What if my voice still shook? But then I remembered I had survived betrayal, buried my mother, lost my husband, found my name again. If I could do that, I could do anything. That night, I lit a fire in the fireplace. Just for me. I wrapped myself in Mama's shawl and wrote down the words I would say to those women, not as a victim, but as a witness. A witness to the kind of healing that doesn't always make sense, but still arrives. And in that quiet space, with the flames dancing and Roscoe curled at my feet, I said something out loud I hadn't said in years. I'm proud of you, Helen. And I meant it, because I had walked through fire and didn't come out bitter. I came out burned, clean. The diner hadn't changed much. Same cracked vinyl booths, same jukebox in the corner playing country classics, same waitress, Donna, who'd been there since Mama used to bring me in for banana pancakes before school. But something about that day felt different. Maybe it was me. I sat by the window, alone, sipping coffee, notebook open. I'd been writing more lately. Letters to Mama, prayers, fragments of thoughts that no longer fit inside my chest. I didn't notice when the man in the next booth looked up from his paper. "Excuse me?" he said softly, with a slight southern drawl. "Is that banana cream pie any good today?" I looked up, blinking out of my thoughts. He was older, maybe mid-60s, clean hands, laugh lines, a gentle warmth in his eyes. "It's always good," I replied. "Donna doesn't mess around with pie." He smiled. "You mind if I try my luck and join you?" I paused. It wasn't romantic. It wasn't heavy. It was human. "Sure," I said. His name was Charles Whitmore, a retired music teacher, widower. Moved back to Maplewood to be near his daughter. He told stories with his hands, and he listened without interrupting. He didn't ask what happened to me, and I didn't offer it. Instead, we talked about peach trees, old hymns, and the smell of rain. When I laughed, and I did, more than once, he looked at me like he hadn't expected to see someone laugh like that. And neither had I. He paid for my pie. And before he left, he tipped his hat and said, "Helen, you've got the kind of peace in your eyes most folks only dream about." That night, I stood at the kitchen sink, watching the moonlight spill across the window pane. I didn't feel butterflies. I didn't feel guilt. I felt ready, not for love, but for life. Because maybe, just maybe, the story I thought had ended was only changing chapters. The day I stood up in front of that women's group, my hands trembled, not from fear, but from the weight of everything I carried into that room. Grief, betrayal, love, loss, and something stronger than all of it, truth. They met in the church basement, not her church. This one was smaller, humble, folding chairs, coffee in styrofoam cups, a plate of store-bought cookies on a paper napkin. But when I stepped inside, I could feel it. Something real. Sisterhood. I recognized the look in their eyes. Some avoided my gaze. Others clutched tissues before I even opened my mouth. These were women who knew pain, who had tucked their own stories behind lipstick and Sunday dresses, just like I had. "I'm not a preacher," I said at the start. "I'm not here to give advice or pretend I have it all figured out. I'm just here to tell the truth." And then I told them everything. The hospital nights with Mama, the note in his pocket, the gardenia perfume, the kiss I wasn't supposed to see, the confrontation in the church hallway, the funeral, the pie, the porch, the quiet forgiveness. I didn't cry, not once, because this time, the tears weren't mine, they were theirs. And I saw what no one had dared say out loud. They were me. When I finished, the room was silent. Then one woman, probably no older than 30, stood up and whispered, "I thought I was alone." Another came next, and another, until the room turned into a chorus of confessions, pain bleeding into healing, shame turning into shared strength. That night, as I drove home under a sky filled with stars Mama would have loved, I felt something powerful settle into my chest. My story wasn't a wound anymore. It was a lamp. And maybe, just maybe, the fire that once burned me was now the light that would lead someone else out. It's been years now. The seasons in Maplewood still come and go. The porch still creaks in the early morning. Roscoe still curls up by my feet when it rains. And the wind still carries the smell of Mama's favorite flowers in spring. But I'm not the same woman I was back then. And thank God for that. I never got an apology from Deborah. I don't expect one. I never got closure from Thomas either. But sometimes silence is the answer. He moved to another county, married again, I heard. They say she looks just like the pastor. That's not bitterness. That's just a quiet truth I no longer feel the need to flinch at. And as for me, I stayed. Not in the old story, but in the town that tried to define me by it. Because I wanted to rewrite that story on my own terms. I joined the women's group full-time, started a small support circle for caregivers, and on Sundays, I sit on my porch with my Bible, a hot mug of tea, and my own peace. And sometimes, Charles joins me. We don't talk about the past. We just sit, breathe, laugh, listen. He plays old records. I read my journal, and every now and then, he looks at me like I'm sunlight he forgot existed. I don't know what the future holds, but I know this. I survived betrayal. I buried my mother. I faced the people who wounded me and didn't let their poison take root in my bones. I lost everything I thought defined me, and in doing so, I discovered the woman God always meant for me to become. She's not perfect, but she's whole. And if someone out there is sitting in the dark, wondering if they'll ever feel whole again, let this story be a lantern. You will. You'll cry. You'll scream. You'll pray with your fists in the air. But one day, you'll wake up, make your bed, pour your coffee, and realize you are the miracle. Have you ever thought you were at the end of your story, only to discover it was your beginning? If this story touched you, I'd love to read your thoughts in the comments. I read every single one with care and love. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Tap the notification bell so you never miss a new story, and share this video with someone who might need it today. And if you haven't yet, watch the next story that's appearing on your screen right now. It's just as powerful, and it might be exactly what your heart needs. Thank you for listening. With all my love, Helen Grace McMillan.